Hey guys, this is Mrs. Marquette, and this is video 2 for day 4 of our factor chapter. So in this video, we're going to still be talking about GCFs, greatest common factors, but today we're going to be, or in this video rather, we're going to be talking about when we can't take a GCF out of every term, but we can take the GCF out of some terms. So I can look at actually grouping my polynomial into two different parts. And this is always going to happen when we have 4 terms. So I'm going to group 2 of the terms together and the other 2 terms together, and then look at our GCFs. So let's look at this first one, and we'll kind of see what we mean. So this is, since we're continuing on our notes, this is number 7. So I've got 3x squared minus 3x plus 4x minus 4. So I look at my numbers. Clearly, I can't take a GCF out of all 4 terms with numbers because I've got 3s and 4s. I don't have anything common there. Also, if I look at the x's, this last term, -4 doesn't have an x, so I also don't have a GCF with my variable parts. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to group this first part, the first 2 terms, and the second 2 terms, and then I can see that there really is a GCF in each part of my polynomial. So if I look at 3x squared minus 3x, the GCF in those 2 terms is a 3 and an x. And if I take a GCF out, 3x times x gives me 3x squared. 3x times -1 gives me -3x. I'm always going to use this middle power, or this middle sign rather, and look at, if I keep that middle sign, what is the GCF out of my second 2 terms? So it looks like there is a 4 in both of those terms. So +4 times x gives me a 4x, and a +4 times -1 gives me a -4. This is the key. Once I get here, I notice that x minus 1 is actually in both terms. I can consider that kind of like a GCF of my whole polynomial. So my x minus 1 is in both terms. X minus 1 times 3x gives me 3x times x minus 1. And x minus 1 times 4, +4, will give me 4 times x minus 1. So notice again that x minus 1 is in both terms, and then 3x plus 4 is what's left over. And now this is my final answer, x minus 1 times 3x plus 4. One major thing to mention, this should happen every time. If you factored by grouping correctly, you should get a common term in your second step that you can factor out as a greatest common factor. Okay, and number 8, on your notes, you may have a squared on that -4z. I want you to cross that out. The problem should read z cubed plus 5z squared minus 4z minus 20. So on this one, again, I see that I don't have a greatest common factor in all 4 terms. I don't have a z in my -20 term, and I don't have a common number or a common coefficient in all 4 terms. So what I'll do is I'll group these 2 terms, and I'll group my last 2 terms, and look at a GCF in each group. In the first group, I have a z squared. That z squared, I can say z squared times z is z cubed. Z squared times 5 is 5z squared. And then again, remember, I always take that middle sign. And then it looks like my GCF in the second 2 terms, in that second group, is a 4. So -4 times z is -4z. And -4 times a +5 is a -20. Again, notice what's happened. I have a z plus 5 that is common in both of my terms. So that z plus 5 is like a common blob, is what I'll call it. So I can say z plus 5 times z squared and z plus 5 times -4. And now I have a factored polynomial. I know that it's factored because these 2 are multiplied. And for now, that's all I'm going to do. In the future, we'll be able to continue factoring this z squared minus 4, but we'll get to that next lesson. All right, moving right along. I see 4 terms. If I don't have any GCF in all four, I can automatically go to factoring by grouping. So in that first group, it looks like there is an A in both terms. X times A is XA. A times Y is YA. In the second two terms, it doesn't look like there's anything in common. There's no GCF. If that's the case, I can take a positive 1 out. Again, I keep that middle sign, but the positive 1 times X is X, and positive 1 times Y is Y. Notice that, again, I've got a common group, common blob. So X plus Y comes out, and what's left over in the first term is A. What is left over in the second term is a 1. So I've got X plus Y times A plus 1 as a final answer. I'll give you a second there. And moving right along to number 10. Looking at all four terms, is there GCF in all four? No. The 18 is missing an X. There's no numbers in common. So I can look at two groups. In the first two, looks like they both have at least two X's. And X times X squared is X cubed. X squared times negative 2 is negative 2x squared. In the second two terms, it's super important that you take out a negative, so keep that middle sign. And our GCF there is a 9, because 9 times 1x is just x, or is just negative 9x, and negative 9 times negative 2 is positive 18, because a negative times a negative is positive. If you had taken a positive out, you would have gotten different blobs, different terms there. So that's an idea, or that's a good reason to go back and make sure you've got that middle sign right. So it looks like x minus 2 is our common blob, and then x minus 2 times x squared gives me this first term, and x minus 2 times negative 9 will give me my second term. And for today, that's all the further we're going to go. In the future, we'll go one step further on that one. If you can, go ahead and try 11, 12, and 13. Pause this video and see what you can do. I'm also going to keep working through all three, so if you need to keep working, that is totally fine if you want to hang with me. So on number 11, I can group. The first two terms have a common b. What's left is an x squared in the first term and a 2 in the second term. My middle sign is a plus. It looks like the common thing in my second two terms, my common factor, is an a. I've got a 2 and an x squared. You might be thinking, yikes, my blobs aren't the same, but really they are. Remember that we can add in any order, so I can rewrite this as a x squared plus 2. And now our blobs are exactly the same. So if you didn't need this step, if you can see that in your head, that's fine. But either way, I take out an x squared plus 2 out of both terms. And what's left in the first term is a b. What's left in the second term is an a. Number 12, I'm going to go straight into grouping. I've got an x squared as my GCF because they both have at least two x's. X times x squared is x cubed. 2 times x squared is 2x squared. Remember to keep your sign in the middle. And I've got a 4 as my GCF. Negative 4 times x is negative 4x. And negative 4 times positive 2 is a negative 8. It looks like I've got an x plus 2 in both terms. X squared times x plus 2. And negative 4 times x plus 2. And for today, again, that's all the further we're going to go. Very last one for this video, number 13. I've got some groups. Remember that when you have 4 terms, this is probably what you're going to do. So double check, make sure that you don't have a GCF in all 4. But then it looks like in the first 2 terms, looks like they both have at least one A, but that's really all they have in common. And then what's left is a 3A plus a b squared. And in the second terms, remember to keep that middle sign, but they each have at least one b. And what is left when I take out a b is a 3 times a times negative b. And then how many b's are left over? Negative b times b squared is going to give me a negative b cubed. Double check, a negative times a positive is indeed a negative. The other reason that this works, that we know that it works, is because then I've got a common blob. So 3a plus b squared is my common term, and then what's left is an a minus b. It is okay that this term is a 3a plus b squared. I can check there is no common factor in 3a and b squared, so I don't have to factor it any further, and I'm good right there. So that was factoring by grouping. That was video 2, and you can pause this video or just click out of this video and go on to the last video for today.